Welcome to State of Water, and thank you so much for listening. I'm Chris Good, Communications Director of Title Track and part of the production team here for the State of Water podcast. This episode is a particularly tender one for us to share with you, as this is our first episode since our beloved friend and colleague Holly T. Bird died after a very short battle with cancer. The shock and grief of her transition to ancestorhood is still very present, and we miss her every single day. Holly's work as a lawyer, activist, and community leader touched so many people's lives through her efforts to ensure safety and well-being for women and children, her advocacy for Indigenous rights and celebration of Native culture, her tireless commitment as a water protector, to name just a few of the many issues that she cared deeply about, in which she brought her one-of-a-kind passion, determination, vision, and love. Over the next several episodes of State of Water, we're going to share conversations with some dear friends and collaborators of Holly's who worked with her in various realms of her water work. We hope these stories and reflections on how Holly's life has influenced some of the other mighty water protectors in her community will serve to inspire you, the listener, as well, to join us in this work and to be a part of honoring this tremendous legacy. Our first guest in this series of tribute episodes is Monica Lewis Patrick, President and CEO of We the People Detroit. Monica has previously been a guest on State of Water, and she returns with some incredible stories about her relationship with Holly and how she sees those experiences informing her work moving forward. Thanks again for tuning in, and now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our host, Seth Bernard, in conversation with Monica Lewis Patrick.
So this is a space for us to just kind of unfurl a little bit as we remember Holly and we come into contact with how Holly lives with us.
Yes.
And I think that Holly has touched a lot of people, and there is a brightness to the way that Holly's spirit lives with us. And that's been something that's been such a theme over the last 2 months of me connecting with people, some of whom I know and work with, some of whom knew Holly from different, sectors of Holly's work or different seasons of Holly's life. But Holly is just such a bright spot in so many people's lives. And I know for you, you have your own story and your own connection with Holly. And I would love to just sort of pass the mic to you, Monica, and let you reflect on Holly with kind of the guardrails off and just kind of let us unfurl into it.
Yeah. First, Seth, just thank you so much for creating space for all of us to add our Holly stories. As you know, and you've had the experience with Holly, Holly was a nova, is a nova, just beyond just a singular star, but a super, super bright star among many stars, which made her even shine even brighter. My first encounter with, I always like to call her Judge Holly, was in her position as a judge. And I met Holly when we were having protests and visuals in Detroit around the massive water shutoffs in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
So this would have been back in like 2014, 2015. And Mother Mona Stonefish came to Detroit to do a lecture with us, a teaching, if you will, to help us have a better understanding of Indigenous practices, understanding the connectedness of our struggle with the global struggle of keeping water clean, safe, and affordable and accessible. And Mother Stonefish actually introduced me to Judge Holly Bird. And I had no idea that Holly was the friend that I needed her until I needed her.
Mm.
And So as we were working in Detroit and beginning to try to send out just a cry and an appeal to our government at a local, state, and national level, that shutting off water was actually creating severe harms. It was putting families in danger of losing custody of their children. Because many folks may not know, in Michigan, if you don't have running water for 72 hours, your children can be taken from you. Detroit was one of the few places that they were exercising this law. Um, Also, we were trying to get a better understanding as we were working with Indigenous family members on how to make sure that we weren't just singularly focused on our struggle and what was happening with our water disparities, but how could we co-create, co-collaborate around our messaging. And Holly was the one that began to help me have a deeper understanding around treaties, around the power of those treaties, even if governments are ignoring them, around territory and what that meant in terms of languaging, the separation between sovereignty and nations, and what we've experienced as just citizens and residents. Holly was the person at the height of the Flint water crisis. She was one of the first phone calls I got.
Mm.
What can we do? How can we support? What undergirding can we provide? Holly was always approaching the work as brilliant as she was. And like I said, a lot of people, if you didn't know, didn't even know how gifted and how credentialed Holly was, because she was just such a humble spirit. But Holly reached out, and I actually, at the time, was up in Keweenaw. And this was the first time we had been to the reservation. This is the first time we had had some exposure to all of the creative work that was happening up there. We were able to go to the fish hatchery. We were able to see the indigenous practices around rice harvesting. We were sitting in sessions with the grandmothers that were advising and counseling us and sharing, a more in-depth understanding of why this has to be a way of life.
Hmm.
And got a call from Holly saying that Flint was in desperate need of water relief. Was there something that we could do to be supportive? And of course, we had gotten a number of other calls. But the fact that Holly Bird was not a resident of Flint, did not reside in Flint, but because of her deep connection and reverence for water, was one of the first people to reach out to ask for solutions and support.
Wow. I
Uh,
didn't know that.
yeah, to me, that just speaks to the heart of who she was. The same thing happened again when Detroit and Benton Harbor had a second round of water shutoffs. And of course, Benton Harbor was experiencing water quality issues. Again, got a call from Holly Bird
Mm.
wanting to know how she could support, what could they do, how could she be an active part of providing solutions. Um, and then, of course, in 2019, when I got appointed to the IJC, and we were challenging the International Joint Commission of the Great Lakes to make sure, and of course, Mr. Frank is a major part of that gathering, but we were really pushing to get more representation from Indigenous family in both the Canadian territories and what we know as the U.S. territories. Holly was my go-to in terms of being able to say, this is a person who understands these systems, but also is operating at a higher level of vigilance and courage and creativity to make sure that we're not leaving people behind as we're putting more systems and structure in place. And so I just can't say enough, Seth,
Mhm.
about the importance to water protection, to water accessibility, to water affordability, to an interconnected conversation, to my depth of appreciation for water as a relative, if it had not been for the great work of Holly Bird.
Mm. Mm. Thank you so much for all of this. Yeah. Water as a relative was one of the first things that Holly really impressed upon me when we first met, was sort of saying like, I'm encouraged by seeing these people show up to take stewardship seriously, but let's change the frame to relationship and let's consider water a relative, not just water being the source of life, but water being alive. And she had this, like you said, I love the way that you talked about how she wielded her understanding and her credentials to practice law and as a tribal judge, and always she always saw law as a healing tool, as a way to facilitate healing. And it wasn't the only way that she facilitated healing, but she saw that this is something that I am going to need to do in this life to be able to answer my calling as a water protector, as an earth guardian, as a spiritual being who made a life of trying to serve people. And so she always, while she could use these tools in ways that few people could, she always did so responsibly and with that compassion, that fierce compassion in her heart.
Yes.
And I love to hear you, who have always been at the forefront of these really important human rights battles for accessibility and affordability, um, talk about how Holly was right in there. And this is like at the same time she was right in the heart of the fight at Standing Rock, and she's working on Line 5 this whole time, right in the heart of that battle, and constantly involved in mutual aid and community care, getting calls day and night from people in her community and her family and her extended family that needed help, and they knew that they could count on her, and they knew that she not only could respond but that she knew other people who could. And so, when folks up here came down with COVID in the first weeks of that journey, it was Holly not only setting up Indigenous mutual aid and mutual aid for elders, but actually driving around door to door, just like finding a way to deliver solutions legislatively and, heart to heart, person to person, one by one. And I think that a lot of people don't know that Holly had connections to Detroit too. Like, she spent a good part of her childhood in Detroit. She always felt like she was a Detroiter and that she had a responsibility to keep showing up for the people of Detroit. So it's awesome to hear from you, that she was right there in the beginning. And then when you got appointed to the IJC, that's another story I hadn't heard before. But I mean, it makes sense to lean on Holly immediately because of her ability to navigate that world with compassion and a sense of like fierce. She was a justice warrior, and
Yes.
yeah, and also just like such a humanitarian. And like, on Monday we collectively, her friends and family and colleagues, received the humanitarian award, the Humanitarian of the Year award on her behalf. And what everybody spoke to was this sense of her ability to sort of cut through a lot of the formality and some of like you know, the tenseness of the systems that are forced on us. And when she was in a room or when she was in a meeting or giving a speech on a panel, she just really cut through to our shared humanity and had such a gift for doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Harry, one of the last conversations we had a few months before her transition, we had been talking about this retreat that we do every year for the past 5 years in historic Idlewild, Michigan, where we
Yes.
bring youth of color together, one, to just improve their relationship with water, because many of our communities, Toledo, Cleveland, Detroit, Flint, um, now we're adding Milwaukee and some other communities, but
Mm.
moving from trauma to transformation, it's hard to get there if you never invite in that water has not been the culprit for harming our communities. but it's been man's misuse and abuse of water that's created much of the trauma that we experience with water. And of course, a lot of people don't know 70% of African Americans in this country don't swim. And a lot of that is based on water trauma.
Hmm.
And it was conversations that we were beginning to see that I'm praying that we'll be able to see come to fruition because of Holly, where she wanted to begin to bring Indigenous youth and specifically Black and Brown youth together,
Mm,
so that there's a sharing of practices, there is a sharing of culture and art and an understanding more deeply about water, from that relational aspect.
mm,
And so it was something that Holly had already began to spark with us that we needed to do, that she definitely understood and was sensitive to the work that we were doing within our respective communities, but was really pushing us to go deeper and to do more. So
yes.
I'm very hopeful that in the next few months and the year to come, that we can begin to do just what Holly was encouraging us all to do, is expand our circle and begin to knit together the human infrastructure of our children so that they won't be looking for each other in times of crisis, but they'll already have those relationships built in so that they'll know where their allies and their friends are when they need them.
Hmm. Beautiful. I'm so glad to hear this. Yeah. And that those seeds, that have been planted over the years will continue to bloom, and I know that the investment that you have made and continue to make in our youth is such a deep one. And I remember being side by side with Holly in so many settings with youth where she was finding these magical ways to help them share their gifts and to have them be witnessed by each other and by the elders in the room in sharing their gifts and their wisdom. And she had this really sort of light and magical way, but there was a real seriousness to it. It was almost like she would anoint people, and she would do it in this way that didn't feel burdensome. She did it to me. She's just sort of saying, "All right, you're a water protector now." And, when she says that to you, you have to take it seriously because she's a serious being, and that's no joke. And she did this to, hundreds of kids all across the region in the setting of teaching them, and again, through the lens of relationship, how to be a water protector. What does it mean to be a water protector? How do we get back into a good relationship with the water? And we worked together in Flint. One of the first things we did, repairing that relationship with the Flint River and learning about the natural world from an indigenous lens. So learning Anishinaabe Moin and having the very process of learning the language have the natural world come alive as relatives for these kids to be able to see it with Holly as a guide. So I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing in Idlewild and that continues and that there's some of Holly's magic in the mix there, in the recipe there. Holly was always trying to organize, and I think pretty much all of the all of the tributes and the big memorial and the honorings of Holly that I've been a part of over the last 2 months since her transition, they have all had a component of organizing and of getting the word out. Um, so I
Of
just,
course it does.
you
I
know,
mean, that's Holly Bird, okay? I don't know any engagement I had with Holly where I didn't leave with an assignment. Like,
hmm
we got to meet, we got to talk, we got to plan, we got to do.
yes,
That was who Holly was. I mean, she had this ability. She definitely understood her divine authority.
mm, mm,
She was not limited by physical capabilities. I mean, folks that know her knows she was really a small package that
hmm
they carried a big punch.
hmm
Um, and because when I first saw Holly, I could not believe that this little person was the same person I'd been talking to on the phone for over a year.
hmm
Uh, and and here comes this really small, petite, beautiful woman, who for some reason I had in my mind's eye that she was older.
Mm-hmm.
and more leaning toward an elder than a young person because she had such a depth of wisdom and such a grounding in terms of who she was and the work that she was responsible to do. And so that to me was where that depth and richness about who Holly was. There was such a huge amount of humility, but also it was matched with a divine authority that
Mm.
not compromising that, we choose whether or not water is our relative, that water is our relative. It was definitive that
Yeah.
we choose whether or not we protect water. No, you protect water like you would protect your children or your family member because they actually depend on that protection. Holly was a solutionary, not waiting for someone to come up with a response. She was always seeking how to do more good in the world.
Yeah.
Because some people wait to be called into the work. No, Holly, I have to believe, was born into it, that understood from birth into her transition that this was her mission.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that. Just you said it. She understood her divine authority, and it was part of her soul's calling from the beginning. In one of the storytelling events that Holly was a part of, she shared a near-death experience that she had, and it helped, just shed more light on who this extraordinary being is. And it was like it in life she went through the experience of experiencing that everlasting peace and that divine love and that oneness with all living things. And she came back. It wasn't her time to go to be with Creator at that time, but she came back having experienced what it's really like to have the veil lifted and to be connected to everything. And I have to believe that she had that the whole time, and that she got a taste of it with the near death experience in the middle of her life, but she kept going. And you talking about her being held as an elder, it reminds me of how she was brought into this Indigenous elder circle more than a decade ahead of schedule, because they're like, no, you're an elder. Like you don't have to, you don't have to be in your 60s to be with us. You're doing the work. You're doing the things
Yes,
that an elder does. You're mothering your community. You're looking at the big picture, seeing what needs to be done and doing it. And you're connected to Creator, you're connected to the life ways, and we want you to be a part of this circle. And I remember she was like, well, this is one of the great honors of my life. Some people are trying to not avoid elderhood, but I feel like being honored as an elder, you know in my 50s is one of the greatest things that could ever happen to me, because this is what I'm here for.
I
And
should. I
yeah.
should. Mm, yeah. Yeah. It's good to know that because you always had that sense that she was carrying a deeper mantle
Mhm.
of responsibility and eldership. That's why I said it was so shocking to see, how young and beautiful she was.
Yeah.
That she was commanding this level of respect, not only for herself and her culture and her people, but she was really, challenging us all to be better humans. Sort of a calling up, if you will.
Yeah. Nice.
Wow.
So, in the spirit of Holly, in the spirit of organizing, it would be great just to hear some of what you're up to and what we the people it has cooking in this wild time that we're living through, and how we can be involved, how we can support the amazing work that you continue to do.
Definitely. And I mean, before I share that, Seth, I just would love if we could continue to seek ways to lift Holly's name. I would love to continue to work with my youth. They have to know who Holly Bird is in their lives and in the universe. So I'm sure we'll find some creative ways to do some storytelling, maybe some animation or creative things with them. Um, just like the story of Charity Hicks, we carry those stories with us. They will live on. We will forever lift and speak the name of Judge Holly Bird as one of our ancestors and water leaders and legends. But for us, the work is still progressing. We're super excited about many things that are happening for we the people of Detroit and with our communities. We are kicking off, as I talked about earlier, our fifth annual Great Lakes Youth Water and Policy Retreat in Idlewild, Michigan.
Mhm.
We'll have about 40 to 50 young people joining us in Idlewild. It is an awesome time for us, one, to just, uh, we get all of our youth trained to swim so that they at least aren't fearful of water. We also do some boating and canoeing, fishing, everything that we can think of that touches water. We use it as a way to communicate our responsibility, our stewardship, and our kinship to water. And a lot of that is because of the teaching and the deep learning that we experience from Holly. We also are having a webinar on the 25th of this month in partnership with our partners at Milwaukee Water Commons and also U.S. Water Alliance. We're hosting a webinar to talk about authentic partnerships. And so this is a white paper that came out of the work that all of us were a part of with the Wecker Caucus, the Water
Mhm.
uh, Equity, Climate, and Resilience Caucus, which you and Holly were a part of. We hosted a conversation a couple of years ago to really get a feel from community and frontline groups on how philanthropy and government and big greens could be better partners. And we wanted to start with the principles and values of frontline and grassroots groups. And so we finished that white paper and now we're pushing it out, one, to make sure that community groups still can provide feedback and input because it's a living and breathing document, but also so that we can use it as a teaching tool to philanthropy and government as some of them are waffling or uncertain or have lost their footing.
Mhm.
We know that our values drive our work, our mission drives our work. So we're not deterred by people that choose to destroy or divest or dehumanize or depress certain groups of people or particular issues. We are still driven by our mission and our values that says that all human life has value and worth, that we have a responsibility not only to people but to the planet, and so we are staying course. And so we can definitely share a link, but on the 25th, we'll have a webinar where all of those folks will be coming together, sharing stories about how our work has evolved over the last decade to get us to this particular point in time, and that all is not lost, that there are still solutions.
Yes.
And we are super excited because last week we introduced legislation in Michigan. It's called the Affordable Water Now bill, and it was introduced by Representative Emily Devendorf, who is representing the districts that are in Lansing, Michigan. And we are so proud of Emily Devendorf. She has taken a bold step to not only support water programming that allows temporary support, but her leadership is really more of the long game. Devendorf has worked with our organization, and we have brought in over 30 groups from across the state of Michigan of varying sizes and backgrounds, everything from housing to mothering justice, reproductive rights, also the rights that relate to quality health care, because water touches every one of those issues. And so we've now built a coalition called the Water Equals Life Coalition, and
Mhm.
that coalition has put together a package of bills along with our legislative champion, Emily Devendorf, that we are moving through the House side of Michigan's government. And we're proud of the fact, too, that it seems as though we may have bipartisan representation on these packages. So super excited about that opportunities because
Wow.
even as people are very bifurcated politically, we don't believe that you stop trying, which is part of what I think Holly left me as a message that Communication is always a starting point for at least some collaboration. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is House Bill 4555, and it is the Water Affordability Now package. Um, the other thing we're super excited about is that our youth, we, the youth of Detroit, are collaborating with UCLA. Several years ago, about a decade ago, we created a game called the Water Drop Game. And it's a game to simulate for community members all of the different conditions that families are navigating to just keep their water on and some of the challenges that they face. And so we use real stories, real situations to create these scenarios to give people greater sensitivity for their community members that may not have water. And so now the game, we call it a game, is going to be turned into a official game. And so it's going to be a digital virtual version of the game, and then it's going to be a board game that's created. And our youth are working to design it and fabricate the different parts of the game.
Wow.
We have put in place 4 3D printers at our facility. And so they will be working with UCLA to bring that game to fruition to where we have a board game and a virtual version. We recently partnered with UCLA and Wayne State, and there is an active exhibit at the Gross Cup Museum of Anthropology at Wayne State. And so what we were able to do is we partnered with groups out of Kenya and out of Mexico. And of course, they approached us about Detroit. And we encouraged them to lift up not just Detroit, but what was happening across the nation around water disparities and water issues. And so we have much of our work around mapping the water crisis in Detroit is on display right now until October, which World Water Day, the exhibit will transition from Wayne State to UCLA. And then it's my understanding it'll go to Kenya and then to Mexico.
Wow.
And then the last thing that I think we're super proud of and excited about is just the work that is happening in terms of the not just the local and the state, but the national work that's happening. As I mentioned, many of us are involved in the Wecker Caucus. We also cross pollinate in other collaborative efforts. And so we're excited about the opportunity to build more power with community and our people through art and through culture. And so we're looking to work with artists and musicians to bring more of that creativity into the water space. So I've been having meetings with philanthropy and also some of the big greens to talk about how we can be intentional about that, especially right now, while there is such oppressive tactics being used.
Yeah.
You know better than I. I know I sing, but I know you play and sing. And so we know that music can soothe. It can be a conduit of collective energy. It can be a bridge builder, if you will. So our hopes are that as some of our young people that are poets and artists and musicians are coming into their awareness as activists and organizers, that music, art, and culture will be another critical part of how they are communicating and collaborating.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for all this work and for the ways that you make everything that you're up to collaborative and cooperative and involving authentic partnerships. And I did get to take a look at that white paper at the Wecker convening, the soft launch. And it's just wonderful. I'm excited to check out the webinar and for that to reach more people. And like you said, all is not lost, and the ground remains fertile for us to do our work and to sow our seeds and to continue to foster, the conditions where life can thrive and where people can find their footing in the work that they were born here to do, the work for justice, the work for peace, the work to restore our broken systems that support life and to create new systems to support life. And I'm so glad to hear that the youth work is continuing to grow, and that arts and culture is a big part of that. And we're always here to lift up what you're doing and to amplify it and to collaborate however we can. And just thank you so much, Monica, for taking time today. And I know your life is very busy with all of this work, but also with caring for your family and for your mother. So thank you so much for taking time to share with me and to lift up Holly's legacy and her spirit and the way it lives with you. Thank you so much.
Well, Steph, thank you. And I just appreciate you so much. I can't tell you how much uh, I really revere uh, your thoughtfulness and your creativity and collective thinking that you bring into the space. Always willing to find good where you can. Always willing to do all that you can do. I can tell you that we are deeply committed to write songs, tell stories, write books, to continue to make sure that Holly's message of love and humanity and really being that connector of the human tissue or infrastructure, if you will, lives on. But I'm looking forward to spending some good times together in the near future. I'm looking forward to continuing to glean from you as an expert and another contributor to water protection. So, anytime you call, my answer is going to be yes. Uh, it may be not today, but tomorrow, but definitely my answer is always yes. And I just want to let you know how much I love you. I really do.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. I love you so much. You're such a hero to me and so many of us. And my answer is preemptively yes as well. So we'll keep it going and continue to live like Holly.
Definitely, definitely. If we can do that, I tell you, the world will be such a much better place if we can just accomplish a little bit of what Holly left all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and onward always.
Love you, Seth. Have a
Love you,
blessed day.
Monica. Thank you so much. Bye bye.